No one in Elmsford ever spoke about the house at the edge of the lake, not because they didn't see it, but because whenever someone tried to describe what happened around it, words seemed to twist in their mouths like thoughts that didn't want to be remembered. And that was exactly what pulled Ethan toward it the night the strange blue light appeared over the water and refused to go away, hovering like a silent question that no one else dared to answer. He had always been the one who noticed the things other people pretended not to see. The faint humming in the distance when the wind was completely still, the flicker of movement in windows belonging to places supposedly abandoned, the way the town felt as though it had been placed very carefully in time and then forgotten by whoever was supposed to keep it moving. And lately those feelings had grown heavier, like Elmsford itself was trying to hide something beneath its quiet surface. That night, while everyone else slept, Ethan stood on the cracked road facing the lake, the reflection of the drifting blue glow rippling across the black water, and he felt for the first time that the town wasn't just strange, it was watching. The house on the shore, shadowed and silent, looked like it had never belonged to anyone, yet every window felt aware of him, every plank seemed to hold a breath, and as he took slow steps closer, he realized he wasn't afraid in the normal way. Instead, he was afraid of what he might finally understand. He told himself he was only curious, that he would look, maybe step inside, and prove to himself that the unease in his chest was just imagination. But deep down he already sensed that this night had been waiting for him, that this wasn't a random encounter, that the blue light wasn't a coincidence but a signal one meant specifically for him. As he reached the weathered porch, the humming grew clearer, not loud, just persistent, like a sound that had always been there but was only now choosing to let him truly hear it. And when his hand touched the doorknob, it turned without resistance, as if the house had hoped for his arrival. Inside, the air was warmer than he expected, and dust didn't float in forgotten layers like in normal abandoned places. Instead, everything felt paused, like someone had simply stepped out for a moment and would return at any second, yet every surface carried the faintest glow, as though the house remembered something it wanted him to see. There were photographs on the walls, but when Ethan looked at them, his stomach tightened because although the faces were unfamiliar, every single background looked like Elmsford, its streets, school, Lake Town Square, but slightly wrong, like versions of the town that belonged to different years, different choices, different outcomes, and none of them matched the world he grew up in. He moved deeper into the house, unable to stop, as if the floor guided his steps, and with each room the sense of being watched changed into something stranger. It didn't feel threatening, it felt expectant, like the house recognized him. In the back room where the humming was strongest, he found an old desk covered with neat stacks of notebooks, everyone labeled with dates that spanned far back before he was born and continued into dates that hadn't happened yet, and his name appeared on several covers, in bold ink, as if it had been part of the town's plans long before he even existed. His hands trembled when he opened one, and the words weren't wild or chaotic like something written by someone losing their mind. They were careful, logical, precise, describing moments from his life that no one could have known, conversations he'd never repeated, decisions he hadn't told anyone, he regretted, secrets he didn't realize he'd carried until he saw them written. At first he thought maybe someone was watching him, stalking him, building a creepy record of his life, but then he flipped forward and saw entries about tomorrow. He read them in disbelief. He would come to this house, he would feel exactly what he was feeling now, and he wouldn't leave the same. Before he could process that, a faint reflection caught his eye in the dusty glass of a cabinet, himself, but slightly older, staring back with exhaustion and something like sorrow. And when Ethan turned around, the room was empty, but the air felt like someone had just stepped away. He wanted to leave, to run, to laugh this off as an elaborate prank, but the humming grew softer, more comforting, pulling him toward a narrow hallway that led downstairs into a place the blue light seemed to bleed through the walls. With every step, memories that weren't his flickered through his mind, moments of the town shifting, people repeating the same day differently, choices resetting, a loop of lives layered over each other. And by the time he reached the bottom, he already knew one terrifying truth. Elmsford wasn't just a town, it was a design, and he had always been part of whatever it was supposed to become. Ethan stood at the bottom of the narrow staircase, breathing air that felt older than the world above it, and as the walls pulsed faintly with that same blue glow, he understood that whatever waited below wasn't merely hidden, it had been deliberately buried beneath years of silence. And now that he was here, it wasn't going to let him pretend ignorance anymore. The room he stepped into wasn't a basement in the normal sense. It looked like the inside of a forgotten observatory, circular and wide, with the lake visible through a cracked stone arch that should have opened to dirt but instead opened directly into the water's shimmering darkness, as though the house existed halfway between the town and something else entirely. In the center stood a massive round table carved with rings of symbols, lines connecting towns, names, dates, and at the center of it all Elmsford, etched deeper than anything else, like a heart forcing everything to orbit it, and Ethan felt a tug inside his chest as if that engraving was tied directly to him. He moved closer, noticing strange metal devices arranged neatly like instruments of measurement, not dangerous but purposeful things designed to mark possibilities, to align choices, to steer outcomes. And he realized the town wasn't random. It had always been managed, guided, nudged towards specific futures by unseen hands that somehow believed this was protection. His name appeared again, this time carved cleanly into the table alongside key points in the town's history: storms, disappearances, sudden good fortune, unexplained coincidences that everyone had once shrugged off as luck. And he understood with an aching clarity that he was supposed to be one of those unseen hands. One of the people the town quietly created, shaped, and waited for. The humming softened as if it approved of his realization, and in the reflection of the lake's glow on the walls, that faint older version of himself appeared again, not a ghost, not a hallucination, but a memory of a future that had almost been. Gazing at Ethan with both relief and regret, like someone who had made choices he didn't want repeated. Ethan didn't hear words in the usual sense. Instead, thoughts flowed directly into his mind, calm, steady, patient, telling him the truth he'd been circling all night. Elmsford had been built on fractures in time, on moments that split into different outcomes, and long ago a group of people had learned to gather those fractures, study them, and gently shape what would happen so the town would survive the tragedies it was always meant to face. They had called themselves custodians, not rulers, and each generation the town chose someone who could see what others wouldn't, who could stand at the edge of impossible knowledge without breaking. And it had chosen Ethan not because he was special in the glamorous sense, but because he was steady, stubborn, and willing to look away when something didn't make sense. He saw then flashes of other Elmsford's versions, swallowed by floods, torn apart by violence, drained into hollow emptiness, and in all of them there had been no one to step into this room to accept the burden of guiding the town gently back towards safer roads. The notebooks upstairs weren't prophecy. They were records of experiments, resets, attempts to fix things that went wrong, and every time someone like him tried and failed, the town quietly rewound pieces of itself, healing out of sight, until eventually only the version that survived remained, leaving behind echoes like the faces in those photographs. Ethan felt fear give way to something heavier but cleaner, a quiet responsibility that didn't demand heroism, only honesty, attention, and care. The blue light brightened gently, not blinding, but warm, and the older reflection of himself began to fade, leaving behind a final feeling. You don't have to do everything perfectly, you just have to stay. Then the room shifted, not in movement, but in certainty, like a decision being finalized, and the table before him rearranged. The lines, pulls, the dates shimmered, and Ethan understood that from this moment forward, the town would no longer move without him knowing. He placed his hand in the center where Elmsford was carved, half expecting pain, half expecting nothing, but instead there was a wave of clarity, like hearing 1,000 whispers become understandable at once. Upcoming storms that would be worse than predicted, a fragile bridge that would fail if ignored, a person who would make a mistake that could hurt others unless gently redirected. All not fixed points but fragile possibilities that he could lean against, change slightly, alter just enough to protect the people living their ordinary lives above. He thought of the streets he'd grown up on, the lake he'd always felt uneasy around, the school, the faces of people who never knew how close their world came to falling apart. And for the first time, the town didn't feel like it was watching him, it felt like it was trusting him. When he finally stepped away, the glow dimmed to a soft pulse, as if the house had exhaled and the basement no longer felt secret. It felt like a workplace waiting for someone who had finally shown up for their first real day. He went back upstairs slowly, feeling lighter and older at the same time, noticing that the photographs on the walls now held only one consistent version of Elmsford, one steady line instead of fractured possibilities, as if the town had decided to stop scattering itself across too many futures. Outside, the sky was still dark, the blue light above the lake fading into ordinary night, and the house behind him no longer looked haunted, it simply looked purposeful. As Ethan walked back toward town, the world felt normal again, but in a new way. The silence wasn't hiding anything anymore. It was resting, and although no one would ever know what had almost happened, they would feel, in quiet ways, that things in Elmsford seemed to work out just slightly better than they should, as if the town itself had learned how to breathe. Ethan didn't feel powerful or chosen. He simply felt responsible and strangely at peace. Because for the first time he understood why he had always noticed the things other people ignored. He was never meant to run from the strange edges of the world. He was meant to hold them together. And somewhere beneath the lake, beneath the town, the house waited calmly, humming softly like a heartbeat, knowing that Elmsford was safe, not because nothing bad would ever happen, but because someone would always be paying attention.